Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm Scott Schneider. This week I'm going to do my first integrated amp review, and I'm going to start with a real beast, the Sansui AU-20000. Come right back. Okay, well thank you for coming back and sticking around. So let's talk about how I'm going to do integrated amps. Really everything. After I did the Pioneer SX1010, I kind of realized I didn't talk enough about the unit, the marketplace, etc., and maybe even how I, maybe have run across it and discovered it. So I think I'll try to do that in the first segment, and then what I plan to do is give you some up-close shots of it and see what it really looks like. And then at the end, just how I did the SX1010 receiver, I put a rating system and a point system together to give it a score and then see where it ends up. So let's talk about the market a little bit in this time frame. So this was released in 1976, and it was part of what Sansui called their professional series. Now, recall the Pioneer SX1010 came out in 1974, and that was the first 100 watt receiver, but I think also the first 100 watt amp. That made a statement, and it really threw the gauntlet down for everyone else in the market. Pioneer was up against Sansui and Sony and Yamaha and Marantz. These were all big names of the day. So Sansui came out after, I guess, a couple of years of realizing that they had to do some leapfrogging here. And they came out with this professional series, and it was the AU-20000 at 170 watts, the AU-11000 at 110 watts, and then the AU-9900 at 90 watts. And to go with this was the TU-9900 tuner, which is here. So these were sold and came out from 76 and manufactured until 1980, I believe. At the same time, the other manufacturers, their top integrated amp, at least from what I can recall, from Marantz and Pioneer and Yamaha. Marantz, I think their top integrated was 110 watts, and Pioneer's and Yamaha's, I believe, was 125 watts. So off the top of my head, I don't recall any other integrated amps that came anywhere close to the 170 watts of the Sansui. So what a response it was. So they had an impressive, huge monster integrated amp at 170 watts, but in addition to that, they took a different road as far as how it looks. Everyone else had Silverface. It was called the Silverface era because that was the majority of the companies. That was the look they were going for. But Sansui took a different approach. They have this anodized aluminum black face here with white lettering and these shiny aluminum alloy knobs, and offset with the, I guess, anodized aluminum black knobs on the bottom. So quite different from anyone else. And so I'm sure these stood out in the audio shops of the day. Up on the racks, everything else is silver, and then here you see these, and they, I hate to use the word pop, but I'm sure it caught the eye because it looks so different. Now, as far as the professional series and the other amps, this 20000 also separates itself from those two by the back casing having this very nice burgundy paint job on it as well. So, which means to me it was meant to be seen. It was meant to be put on the top shelf of your audio system right next to your phonograph and turntable and show it off. I don't think they really intended for it to be hidden because it really is quite a stunning piece. Even today, to me it doesn't look dated like a lot of other Sansui pieces can. The 9090s and the other units, the receivers that they had, can look dated. But to me, this particular series still looks quite relevant today. And I would say that you wouldn't be shocked to see this line sitting on a shelf somewhere today. Now, a little bit about the story. I thought it would be interesting to where I have something that's kind of an interesting story about how I came across the unit. This could be a little long-winded, so bear with me, but right before, about a month before I found this unit, I was cruising online, classified ads, and ran across a AU-20000 with a matching cassette deck, the TU-9900. They had a turntable, and it was right at the top of the list, and I was the first caller. Called it right away, and told him I was on my way to get it. He wasn't asking very much for it, and within 20 minutes, I was on the street, and I couldn't find the address. So I quickly called him back and said I was here to see the system, and he said, "Oh, I've talked to some other people," and he hung up on me. So I was a bit stunned, and so there were not many houses on this street. So I knew I was within this vicinity, but I couldn't understand why I couldn't find the house number. So I called back a few minutes later, and I quickly tell him we talked, and I must have written the number down wrong, and he gives me the house number. So I immediately turn around and go to the house, and as I do, I realize that there's another vehicle, a truck, in this house that I had passed, and I knew it wasn't there. So I went anyway and went up to the door, and I get there, and he says, "Someone else already came, and goodbye," essentially. So I lost the deal, and so I was quite upset, disappointed. I go home and lick my wounds, what have you, and so I still monitor the ads, of course, and 3 or 4 weeks later, another one pops up, believe it or not. Again, I'm first, and I connect with the seller, make arrangements. This one was further away, and so I go and see the units. This time, I get the address, of course, but it includes the original boxes and everything with it, with the 20,000 and the tuner. And I think it came with some speakers and something else, but those were not Sansui models. But irregardless, I was quite surprised that I was able to run across another set not much longer after that, and I was able to acquire them. So as it turns out, maybe that was the better deal and better for me in the long run. So it was interesting nonetheless, and it's an interesting story I thought I might share. So now I'm going to, in these reviews, I'm now going to move into some videos, some up-close shots, and give you a real good look at what these units look like. And then after that, I'll come back and talk through the specs and give it a rating, and then summarize it at the end. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed the close-up videos and some of the other pictures and things that were shown before. That gives you a good sense of really how it looks up close. It's an impressive looking amplifier, really. To me, it looks quite contemporary. I think they stayed up many nights, those engineers, putting this together and coming up with something that 40 years later, for me anyway, still looks relevant and still sounds great. I had this paired with my Pioneer TZ9 speakers in my office actually for about 3 to 4 years. So I have enjoyed it tremendously. It's a fantastic unit. So now, as I mentioned, I'm going to get into, I put together a point system based on some specs and functionality and features. So I wanted to run through that, give you an idea of where the points end up. Given this is such a top-of-the-line integrated for the era, it will probably score the highest of really just about anything that I can think of. So I've kind of started off at the top here. And everything else will be something less than that. But it'll be fun. If we do enough of these, I think it'll be fun to come back and see where do they rank and as far as functionality and ratings later. So that's kind of my intention, to come back and do a summary after I've done several of these and do a comparison and just show where these scored and what the differences were. So let's jump into it. For the watts, it's 170 watts. So for the 170 watts, it gets 20 points. Now it incorporates the bonus, which is having the ability to handle 4-ohm speakers. So with a 4-ohm spec, you can hook up a lot of other speakers that are 4-ohm rated, and that's a bonus, because if it doesn't do that, you have lost out on a large segment of speaker models out there. So because it handles 4-ohm, it gets another 30 points a bonus because of that quality alone. Now, moving into phonos, has 2 phono connections, but it gets bonus points because it has impedance matching and it can accommodate an MC cartridge. Well, it's not a common feature. So again, similarly to why it's important for 4-ohm rating, it has impedance matching to accommodate MC cartridges. So again, widens and broadens your ability to handle, all kinds of cartridges. So it gets bonus points for that. So 10 points each for the 2 phonos, and then 20 points bonus for the feature of being able to accommodate an MC cartridge. Number of sources, has auxiliary tape and tuner, whereas the Pioneer receiver already had a tuner, so it didn't have that ability, that input. So 5 inputs, 10 points each, 50 points. Has balance control, 5 points. Has a volume muting switch. So has 2 different decibel ratings for that, but it gets 10 points for the switch itself. Does not have a loudness button. The one thing that, out of all that, it doesn't have a loudness, which is kind of unusual. But the fact that it gives you so much tone control, I'm assuming that's probably why they left it out. So tone defeat switch, 10 points. And then moving into bass, mid, and treble controls, 5 points each. Now, power meters. In a dedicated amp, you don't have anything else going on because you have a separate pre. So in dedicated amp, you can have huge meters. On an integrated, you don't have a lot of front real estate here to put meters. So the fact that they were able to even squeeze them in here was nice, because there are still a lot of integrateds that don't have any meters at all. So they got those on here. So that's 20 points. Pre or amp and pre connection, or the ability to separate that. There's a switch. Most of them, if you're familiar with that, they have on the back of your receiver amplifier, you'll see that there's a pre-out main in. And so that's the ability to connect your preamp to your amp. Or rather, I should say, the ability to disconnect them and use those functions separately. So you would disconnect those, that little U-shaped bar, and that would disconnect them, and then you could use them separately. On this, they have a switch back there. If you watch the pictures or video, you'll see a switch back there that actually connects them or disconnects them internally. And if you disconnect them, then you would connect to the RCAs on the back and then use them separately. So it's a nice feature to have if it just gives you more flexibility. So I've given 20 additional points for that. On AC connections, a switched connection, it only has 10 points, and the unswitched, it has 3, so 5 points each, which is 15 points. And then lastly, the number of speaker sets it can connect, which is 2. So 10 points each for that, so 20 points total. Now, if you've kept up with that scoring, that is 265 points. I need to do a quick addendum. So while I was in the editing process, I received a great comment from Samuel. He pointed out that in my scoring system, I left off the feature of having a high-low filter. And it's a great feature to have if you have some low-end rumble or some high-end hiss, and you can throw the switch and filter and cut that out. It very much enhances your music. So I've added that to the scoring system, and now if the amplifier or receiver has that feature, it will get an additional 10 points. The AU-20000 certainly does have that feature. So it will get an additional 10 points, which raises its total to 275 points. So thanks for pointing that out, Samuel, and now we'll get back to the rest of the video. I think that's going to be far and away the highest rating, or highest points that I give any integrated amp. I think most of them will range probably 150 to 180, something like that, for the most part. So that's how I rated it and scored it. I think pretty obvious. It has really just about every feature, so not a shock that it scored so high. That's it. That's, I guess, about it for this review. If you've had this amp or have learned anything about it, put it in the comments. Let me know. If you have another integrated amp that we're familiar with, let me know your thoughts about it as well. Just like to hear some dialogue and some feedback. Let me know also if there's some other feature or some other way and some other review that I can give. I know that people like to hear my thoughts on how it sounds. I had this amp in my office paired with my Pioneer TZ9s for about 3 years, and it was in there for 3 years because I liked it so much. Eventually, I have different stuff in there. Eventually, I had to swap it out, but the pairing of it was exceptional. Again, those are 4 ohm rated speakers, so had it not had a 4 ohm spec, I couldn't have used those speakers. And they're phenomenal. I'm going to do a review of them pretty soon. But anyway, the majority of brands tend to sound similar amongst the different models. So Sansui, for me, sounds, I would say, similar in the way that, and I may get some feedback for this, but to me, it sounds similar to Macintosh in the way that it has a warmth to it. And that's sort of known. There's a lot of people, a lot of feedback. People will say that Sansuis are warm sounding. And I tend to find that. I find it, and I will go through these when I go through them individually, but Marantz's I find to be a little brighter on average, for their different receivers of that era. Yamaha's I find to be overall, I'll say, uncolored. They sound to me like there's no expression from the engineer. They really wanted to bring everything as clinically through. So they just don't have color to their signature, if you will. So those are kind of general terms. Pioneers, I find them to have a little more color, not as much, or not greatly or significant that it sounds completely different. I don't want to insinuate that they have a different tonal quality, but they're a little more lively, I'll say. A little different than the average Sansui or Macintosh, but exciting, in a way. I think that's why there's so many people that like them, because they have, some excitement to the points of the music that you're listening to, they accentuate that in a way, which I think most people like. So that's a sort of a general way that I view. I have so many, and I have so much of each line that I can sort of put those similarities into categories, if you will. So that's how I rate or think about the AU-20000. It has a warmth and depth because of the 170 watts that it has. It has grunt to it, which a lot of other integrateds just don't have, and receivers. So exceptional unit, very much so. If you have one of these, there aren't too many things that you can't throw at it. There's a few exceptions out there, but for the majority of the speakers and other things that you might want to connect to this, if you are putting anything in it that's relative to that time frame, not much you can't throw at this thing and it not sound good. So anyway, that's my feedback on it. Again, put some comments in, let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next review.